you know, like, okay, cool. And it doesn't even really cool. But have you guys seen Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure?
Yeah.
The mall that they were running through, or there's actually, it was a couple of malls.
Yeah.
That was Metro Center Mall that's off of I-17 and 30? Or Dunlap, I-17 and Dunlap. So, like, that was like back in the 80s,
Yeah.
when they had like an ice skating rink and stuff inside of it. And I live near the Circle K that they were sitting out in front of. Which is kind of like, I seriously, I want to go straight out in front of that Circle K and just ask people, do you know when Columbus ruled it? There's like a whole list of like sites that they've filmed.
Yes, and Jane, from here, do you know of any good Chinese place to eat?
Oh, Chinese places? Well,
Were they cooking Chinese and stuff?
are you talking about like teppanyaki, like you want? Well, there's Kobe, there's Benihana. You have access to a car?
Yeah.
Okay. There's Kobe that's off of the I-10 and I believe it's Elliott. You have to drive towards Tucson, but it's pretty decent. I like it. The best one that I've ever been to was in Gilbert, but it's really far away, so I wouldn't drive out that far. But Kobe's pretty good. They've got some pretty good meat, and they're decent.
How long did it take to get there?
Yeah, Kobe's good. Benihana is pretty good. And there's another one. One that's not as commercialized.
We're just here to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I think it's Sakura's. Yeah.
Yesterday, I remember we were talking about it. I don't even know this place. The place to go and stuff.
There's
You want the first name?
Devin. Yeah, it's Devin.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if you're looking for Chinese food, there's the Chinese Cultural Center. There's some pretty good places that are there. Okay, so if you're looking for like a real Chinatownish type thing, out towards Mesa, there's this place called the Mekong's. That place has a huge Asian market, and then there's like, you're gonna do hot pie, there's Vietnamese, Thai food. It's all sorts of different types of Asian food. I really like that place because you could just pretty much go wherever you want. I got looked at really weird. I went there by myself to this Vietnamese place and got some what do you call it? Some pork chops. And like sometimes my eyes are bigger than my stomach, and I wasn't eating at all, and I think they thought that I just didn't like it, and they were looking at me like Because I filled myself up with spring rolls before. But that place was really good. I've never been served tea in a regular coffee place. So that was a little weird.
Were you able to finish it? Did you finish it?
No, I have 5 more. All right, sorry about that. Now, for the couple students that came in just a little bit late, I want to change something up just a little bit. I'm hoping Gordon shows up before long, because I'll end up saying this again. What I want to do is, I want to kind of make things a little bit simpler on the 2 remote students, right? And again, most of you heard this. This is for Emery, Lee, and Devons. Is the labs today? All right, we'll do some of the labs in line, but as the league goes on, I'm going to push them to the end of the day, so that Chris, right, is 3 hours ahead of us. A couple weeks ago when we changed clocks, right? When it's 2 hours ahead, it's not that big of a deal, but it's 3 hours ahead right now. So when we're finishing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it's 7 o'clock back there. It's already past dinner hour and stuff. And he's got a couple little ones and stuff. So I want to try to make it as best as I can for him, to accommodate him, right? I can't always do this with the class, but this one we can. So what I'm going to do, like I said, what I'm going to do is in the afternoons, we're going to push the labs to the end of the afternoon and have you in lab hopefully around 2 o'clock, right? So it'll be 2 to 4 will be lab time. 2 to 4 will be lab time. That way it's basically 5 o'clock there for him, and then he can either do the labs in the afternoon or they can get up and do the labs in the morning, because you figure when we start here at 8, it's already almost lunchtime there for him. So, and the same thing for the students here in house. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, if you say, you know what, if you want to take your piece of paper, you want to go home and do the labs at home, that you can do that too. It's your choice whether you do them here or you do them at home. It's totally up to you. I will warn you, right? If you're trying to do the labs and you only have a single monitor, or actually these labs won't be that because the steps are right there in the book, right? If you were doing labs from the online courseware and then trying to use GoToMyPC to connect here in the classroom, that would be a nightmare. It'd be step, okay, monitor, oh, what was that step? Oh, what was that step? I had people try to do the class with one monitor and it doesn't work. So, all right. So with that said, all right, let's talk about, all right, the last 2 physical components of Active Directory, and then we'll finish up the lecture, all right? I want to talk about sites before I talk about a read-only DC or an RODC, right? I want to talk about sites. Sites are a physical component of Active Directory, right? Sites are used to control the following things. Logon traffic. I will always authenticate within my site before going across the site boundary to another site to authenticate. Right? We use sites to control replication traffic. We replicate inside of a site on a different interval than we do site to site. Then finally, right, site traffic or sites, if you have Active Directory where applications, right, sites control that Active Directory where application traffic. So I'll use that application within my site before going across the site boundary, or I'll replicate inside the site for that application before I go across the site boundary, right? So I use sites really to control traffic, whether it be logon traffic, replication traffic, or application traffic, right? I use sites for that. So the question then is, well, what is a site? What is a site? Microsoft defines a site as the following. Now, I'm going to say this about 6 times. So you can write it down after the 3rd or 4th time, right? An Active Directory site is defined as one or more well-connected, high-speed, persistent, reliable IP subnets. One or more well-connected, high-speed, persistent, reliable IP subnets. Right? An Active Directory site is one or more well-connected, high-speed, reliable IP subnets. I think I've said that once or twice before in my career. Right? One or more well-connected, routed. Right? Routed. High speed, 10 megabits or faster. Right? Persistent, available 24/7. Reliable, Microsoft ain't getting that can of worms. Right? Microsoft says whatever your company decides as reliable. Right? So what you consider reliable might be different than what the company B decides is reliable. Because remember, you've got 6 nines, 5 nines, 4 nines, 3 nines, 2 nines, 1 9. Right? When it comes to reliability. All right? The more nines you have, the more money it costs you. Okay? Anybody know, right? If you tell someone that you're going to guarantee a service for 6 nines, what the maximum downtime is for a 365-day period?
Like 99 point something
No,
percent
no,
uptime.
it's 99.9999% uptime, right? That's 6 nines. But does anyone realize what the maximum amount of downtime is for something you guarantee to be up 99.9999% of the time? The max downtime for a 12-month period is 52 seconds. Right? Big, big dollars. Okay? I only know of a couple entities that are like 6 nines. And there are things that control things that go boom or boom. All right? Not many things have 6 nines. Okay? See in there. But again, an Active Directory site is defined as one or more well-connected, high-speed, persistent, reliable IP subnets. I may have 5 network segments, 5 subnets that make up a site. Example, right? Let's say that the building across the street, right, 14, 15-story building, right? They decided they want each floor of the building to be a different subnet. Right? Chances are the floors all connect together with something faster than 10 megabits. So that might be 14 subnets, but they all represent a site. They go from that building to this building. As long as the speed between this building and that building is over 10 megabits per second, we can be part of the same site by Microsoft's definition. But if the speed between this building and that building drops below 10 megabits, by Microsoft definition, I have to configure this IP subnet at this building as a different site by Microsoft definition. Okay? That organization I worked with over in New Mexico, right? Los Alamos, National Labs, they have a facility in Carlsbad, they have a facility in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and they have a facility in Vegas, New Mexico. Las Vegas, New Mexico. Is it Las Vegas or Vegas?
Well, Chicago too.
And a site in Chicago? I didn't know about the site in Chicago, right? But they're connected together via fiber. Is fiber faster than 10 megabits? Guess what? Their site, their facility in Carlsbad is part of the same site as their facility in Los Alamos. They don't have a domain controller in Carlsbad because their connectivity speed is fast enough. Now, if by definition, if that speed wasn't 10 megabits, they would need a domain controller in Carlsbad, and it would need to be configured as a site. Okay? So within a single site, inside of a single site, let's say we're an organization, we only have one location, and everything's connected together by something faster than 10 bits, right? The way we replicate is, right, we use a multiple master model. So every domain controller has a writable copy of whatever database that domain controller maintains. Right? So when changes occur, changes can go either direction. When I make a change, now, I'm going to fib to you here a little bit, and then I will correct the fib. When a change occurs on this domain controller here, right, depending where I'm at in my replication cycle, right, I may hold that change for a while. We replicate on a 5-minute interval. Which means, if I am 4 minutes and 59 seconds into the replication cycle, 1 second after the change is made, I'm going to notify my partner I've got to change. If I am 1 second into the replication cycle, I'm going to hold that change for 4 minutes and 59 seconds until I tell my partner I got to change. It's always a pull process. Seen in Microsoft is a push process. Right? I've had people complain to me about that before and tell me I'm wrong. Right? You name me a service, right, and I will prove to you it is not a push process. Everything in Microsoft is a pull process. What does that mean? I go get the change. Well, people go, well, Windows Update? No. I notify you there's Windows Updates and I go get the changes. Well, group policy? No. I tell you there's group policies available and you go get them. Well, DNS? No. DNS says I've got to change and I go get them. Well, what? No. I notify you I got to change. Everything in Microsoft says. Right? You may know. Hello. Right? Right? You may notify me that you've got something for me, right? And then I'll go get it. Okay? In Active Directory replication, right, we're going to replicate on a 5-minute interval. Right? We're going to have a maximum of 3 hops. Right? What does that mean by 3 hops? Not router hops. Domain controller hops. Right? Domain controller hops. With a maximum latency of 15 minutes. With a maximum latency of 15 minutes. Within a site, if a change is made on a domain controller, right, I can guarantee that change is felt on every domain controller within that site within 15 minutes. Make sense? Here's the gotcha. This is Active Directory. They're a teenage child playing on their phone. And Devin goes, time for dinner. Okay. She goes, time for dinner. Okay, I heard you the first time. Well, they're doing this, or they're texting. She goes, time for dinner. Or go do your chores. Take out the trash. Get ready. We're leaving in 15 minutes. I heard you the first time. I heard you the second time. And I heard you the third time. When am I actually going to stop what I'm doing? Think about it. When am I actually going to stop? When I'm darn good ready. Remember, Active Directory is a pull process. So Devin is another domain. Hey, Rick, I got changes for you. Okay. When am I going to go get them? When I'm ready. With a maximum of 5 minutes. But I'll go get them. Promise. So we got Leo over there, who's the administrator, right? He connects to the Devin domain controller, or he connects to the Rick domain controller and sees that I haven't got the change yet from Devin. So he right-clicks on me, he says, replicate now, and I say, okay. He checks, and I still haven't got the change. Replicate now. Okay. Sometimes during that 5-minute period, I go, hey, Devin, you got changes for me? She goes, yeah. Well, he's clicked on replicate now 10 times. Hey, Devin, you got changes for me? No, I already give them to you. Hey, Devin, you got changes for me? No, I already give them to you. Hey, Devin, you got changes? Because you told me to replicate 10 times, and I got all the changes the first time. That's the hardest thing to think about in Active Directory. Yes. Right? I consider it a spoiled kid. Right? It's going to replicate. You just have to trust it's going to replicate, and there may be a maximum latency inside the site of up to 15 minutes. But you can guarantee every domain controller is going to get within 15 minutes. At some point, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and go, hey, Devin, I heard you got changes for me. Get them. And the max amount of time is going to be 5 minutes. That's the way Active Directory is set up. I may be busy doing something else. Now, 9 times out of 10, Rick, I got changes. Okay, what are they? But that 1 out of 10 times, I'm doing something else that I can't respond immediately. Make sense? Here's the other cool thing. Every domain controller has at least 2 replication paths. Right? So that we have built-in redundancy. So if one path goes down, I can still get the change through another path. And I'm no more than 3 hops from any other domain controller. And this is what's cool. There's this thing in Active Directory called the KCC, the Knowledge Consistency Checker, the KCC. When I add a domain controller to the environment, or I gracefully remove a domain controller from the environment, every domain controller has the KCC. We negotiate a new replication topology to ensure that every domain controller is no more than 3 hops from any other domain controller, and every domain controller has at least a minimum of 2 paths. So basically, we all get together and we create this replication topology. We discuss it. Make sense? Then all of a sudden, I go offline, right? I'm being shut down gracefully. Or I get demoted. Hey, everybody, I'm leaving the network. It's been nice being here. And immediately, every one of you start chattering with each other, and you build a replication topology that ensures none of you are more than 3 hops from anybody else, and you ensure every one of you have at least to get changes to you and from you. Right? Make sense? If I come back in line, it does exactly the same thing. But here's what's cool. Let's say that Lee and Matthew are my direct replication partners. They're who I got changes. And they haven't heard from me in an hour. This is the default, 1 hour. Matthew will go, hey, Rick, you still there? Lee will go, hey, Rick, you still there? Yeah, I'm still here, just no changes. Okay, cool. Well, guess what? They don't have any changes. So their direct replication partner is going to ask them if they haven't been heard from a hour. Right? No, we haven't got changes. Oh, cool. So eventually everybody in the network stops talking. An hour later, hey, Rick, you got changes for me? Nope. That happens every hour for every domain controller in the environment. And here's why. What if all of a sudden I went, hey, Rick, you got changes for us? Yo, Rick, you got changes for us? Yo, Rick! Hey, you got changes for us? And I don't respond. Guess what they both do? Hey, everybody, Rick is dead! We need to generate a new topology that takes Rick out of the loop. So now everybody generates a new topology, right? That ensures that no one domain controller is more than 3 hops from any other domain controller, and every domain controller has a minimum of 2 replication paths, and I'm not in it. Guess what happens when I finally come back online? Hey, everybody, I'm back! And we generate a new topology now. I'm intentionally leaving Chris, Gordon, and Jonathan out of this equation. Right? They're in different sites. They're in different locations. Right? They're not in our site. We'll add them into the mix here in a few minutes. Make sense? Okay. So every single domain controller has a minimum of 2 paths, no more than 3 hops, right? And a maximum 15-minute latency. So if I were to add another domain controller in here, right? There's 1 hop, 2 hop, 3 hop. I can't go that way. So maybe the replication path is that way. Or it could have been that way. Or it could have been that way. I have no control of that because that does it. Now, if you think you're smarter than this, you can build your own manual connection objects. Guess what happens when your manual connection object crashes and burns? It goes, all right, smart guy, smart gal, you are smarter than me, you fix it. I'm not going to. It's kind of spoiled. Okay? So questions about replication within a single site. Okay? So replication between sites occurs on a 3-hour interval. That's the default, a 3-hour interval. Now, at the edge of your site, there's going to be a domain controller referenced as the bridge server. Right? That's the server that all inbound and outbound traffic goes through to the site. Okay? The bridgehead server is chosen by a thing called the Inter-Site Topology Generator, or the ISTG. Now, we get into more detail in the 412 class to understand how replication works, especially if you're in a multiple site environment, for when we do things in the next module. Okay. So now we do site-to-site replication on a 3-hour interval. Okay. So something changes in a site here in Phoenix, right? And we have the site where Jonathan is located, right? It could take up to 3 hours before it gets to where Jonathan is. From the time it changed here till the time it gets to where Jonathan is, because of our site-to-site replication. Site-to-site replication. The default's 3 hours. The minimum is 15 minutes. The maximum is 31 days. Well, why you would set it to once every 31 days, but you could. All right. There are things referred to as urgent replication. Right? Example, right? Let's say, right, Emery is a domain controller, right? And Rick just locked himself out with a password violation. That's urgent replication, right? He immediately broadcasts, hey, all my connection domain controllers, and let's say it is Sunil and Devin, right? Hey, partners, we have urgent replication, Rick out. You immediately stop what you're doing and you go get that urgent replication. You then immediately announce to your partners, right? Right? Oh, and Lee, we got urgent replication. Rick locked themselves out. You go get it immediately. Right? Then you both announce urgent replication, and let's say Matthew's your partner. Right? And he'll go get the change. Within seconds of urgent replication occur, every domain controller in the site knows about it. Within seconds. But wait a minute, what happened to those 3 domain controllers that in those 3 other sites where Chris and Gordon and Jonathan are located? Right? Site-to-site replication by default, how often? 3 hours. So let's say Matthew's the bridgehead server that points out those other 3 locations. He will immediately announce, hey, I've got urgent replication. Rick locked himself out. Those 3 domain controllers are at those 3 locations of the bridgehead servers immediately come to, actually, when he says they urgent replication, they come to him and they pull that urgent replication over. And as soon as they get in their site, hey, everybody, I've got urgent replication. People come and find out what it is. And immediately on every domain controller in the organization, within a matter of seconds, Rick is shown as a locked out account. That's urgent replication. Changing your Kerberos key is urgent replication. Changing your domain functional level is urgent replication. Changing your force functional level is urgent replication. Changing a password is not. Creating an account is not. Disabling or enabling an account is not. Changing group affiliation is not. Unlocking them is not. Okay? Makes sense? So if I have a multiple site environment, here's Phoenix, here's where Jonathan is, down here's where Chris is, over here's where Gordon is, right? Let's say this is our site-to-site topology. Phoenix where Gordon is, Gordon where Jonathan is, Chris to Phoenix. That's our actual site-to-site topology. How often do we replicate? Once every 3 hours? I make a change to the Active Directory structure down here. How long will it be before Jonathan knows that change occurs?
Yeah, for like 9 hours.
9+ hours. Here's why. How long did the change take to get from the domain controller where the change was here to the bridgehead server in this site? Take up to 15 minutes. So it gets to the bridgehead server here. Right? How long did it take before the change gets to that bridgehead server? Up to 15 minutes. It gets to here. How long before it gets to this bridgehead server? Could be another 15 minutes. It gets to here. Right? How long before every domain controller inside Jonathan's site knows about it? Could be up to 15 minutes. A change that was just made down in Maricopa may take 10 hours before a user feels it in Jonathan's location. Does that make sense? So if I wanted that change to be felt immediately where Jonathan was, and I don't care about it being felt where Chris is, what do I do? Even easier than that.
Connect to the domain controller that's in
Connect to a domain controller up here and make the change up there so it's felt within 50 minutes. I don't care if it takes 10 hours to get down here. It's not for these users. Right? Even though Chris might be down here as a domain admin, he may have users up here that he affects. Maybe they're in his OU, even though they're up there. So he'd want to connect to a domain controller up there instead of down here. Now, I can't do that in my demo yet because I only have one domain controller. But let me show you how you would do that. Just reading a couple things here. Jonathan, Gordon, is video working for you guys now? I just noticed your chats. Okay. Because I can't necessarily see you guys chatting up there. If you guys are having video audio problems, if you would just speak up and say, hey, can you check chat? Or just say, hey, Rick, I chatted, or I text you.
We need to pause ours here, though, too, right?
Yeah, you need to pause your videos here in the classroom if you haven't yet. Yeah, we don't need a video stream coming back in here. Do you see what Devin, they just re-ended us?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Uh-oh. I have a problem. My start menu's not working. Houston, we have a problem. I can't launch anything. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Windows key. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Windows key 5. Oops, that's not what I wanted. 1, 2, 3, Windows key 6. All right. We need to take 10. I need to reboot my box. I've lost control of my mouse.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? You know why I lost control of my mouse? I bet I got it back now. Yep. All right, I just told everybody to take 10, so I didn't realize the pin was laying there until just now.
So if those pins are removed, it automatically assumes that you're using that?
Yeah. I didn't notice the pin was laying there until I looked up and I saw it missing out of the.
Do you know anything about this free Microsoft exam voucher thing?
Yep, I'll talk about them.
Oh, no problem.
The Dev, AKA Dev.
Yes, I saw that. Like, no, my mom. Here.
They're doing that now because of what you said yesterday.
Yeah. I get called Stephanie on the phone a lot too. Like, I'll answer the phone and say my name, Devin, and like, oh, hi, Stephanie. I'm like, where did I get Stephanie from?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so moving right along, right? Actually, I didn't have to restart my box. After I sit down, I realized that one of the pens wasn't up in the tray up there, so I thought I was drawing instead of using the mouse. So I'm in my domain controller. I'm in Active Directory users and computers. I only have one DC, so I really can't demo this. But what I would do is on Active Directory users and computers, I can right-click. There's an option to change domain controller. Right? When I click on this, notice this lists what site the domain controllers are in. So this gives me the ability to change, right, to a domain controller that's at the appropriate site. And that's where I would make the changes, is at that site. So that they're going to be felt at that site instead of having to wait for replication to occur. Right? Does that make sense? All right. Questions about sites? So this thing called read-only domain controllers. Let's say I have my Phoenix site, and about 100 miles due west of Phoenix on Interstate 10 is a little area called Quartzsite. For those of you that aren't from the Phoenix area or from Arizona, right? Quartzsite during the summer is one of the very smallest cities in the state. Population in the low hundreds. During the winter, it becomes one of the largest cities in the state in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, right? They're all snowbirds. The problem is, this town out there doesn't have houses. It doesn't have a lot of RV parks. So if you ever drive west on the I-10 in the fall, the winter, and the spring, the desert is just full of RVs. They're like RV parks in the desert. And they have trucks that run up and down through there on a daily basis with water and sewer and all that stuff. People run their generators. They have solar power. But it becomes one of the largest cities in the state, all because there's something to do with rocks out there, right? But let's say out there in that little bitty town, we have a corporate office. And Microsoft doesn't say there's no limitation to the number of people that an RODC can have, but they used to publish 8 to 10 people, right? 8 to 10 users. There's no physical reason why it could be not be more than that, right? It could be as many as you want. But let's say, for instance, I had a domain controller here in Phoenix. I had a domain controller over here in Quartzsite. Remember I said every domain controller has a writable copy of whatever database it maintains. So on Quartzsite, I get that little bitty office, 8 to 10 users, 12 users, whatever. And I don't have real good physical security of my DC. I run the risk of that domain controller becoming compromised. If that domain controller becomes compromised, someone might inject in something into my Active Directory database in any one of those partitions, but the schema, and it effectively, right, downing my Active Directory structure. They do it during the evening, right? It could take up to 3 hours to replicate to corporate headquarters, but chances are if they're smart enough to inject something bad in my Active Directory structure, they're also smart enough to force replication, right? And then over here I've got the Chris site, I've got the Jonathan site, I've got the Gordon site, and they're smart enough they force replication to those locations also, right? Because it's happening during the night. Before I come in the next morning, my entire Active Directory structure may be destroyed, or the entire infrastructure being compromised. Good thing or bad thing? Very bad. RPE possibly? So Microsoft introduced this brand new capability. Now, this is where it's really strange. In Forest Level 2003, they gave us the ability to have a read-only domain controller. But it requires a 2008 server to be the DC. They gave us the capability in 2003 Forest functional level, but I have to have 2008 domain controllers in order to support it. So what happens is when I build this domain controller out here in Quartzsite, I build it as an RODC. Right? What that does is it allows inbound replication, but outbound replication is disabled. It makes that database 100% read-only. User changes their password, they go to the nearest upstream domain controller, in this case Phoenix, to change their password. A user out in Quartzsite group policies, they connect the domain controller in Phoenix to make changes to group policies. Right? They do edits to the Active Directory database, whatever it is, they connect to a domain controller in Phoenix, not the domain controller in Quartzsite. So the domain controller in Quartzsite is used for two reasons and two reasons only: to authenticate users and to provide to them group policies. So they're not having to go across the WAN to pull all that data. Yes?
Isn't that kind of like the ideal place to do a delegation? So you could have somebody on that site who can do like password unlocks, things like that.
But they still have to go up to Phoenix to make those changes. You're probably going to have a domain admin. You're probably going to have an admin out here, right? There's probably going to be a help desk out here.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Who's delegated to Phoenix to make those changes.
But there's going to be somebody that's going to be, right? You may either have a help desk out here or a phone number that rings in Phoenix or help desk, right? Whatever it is, all the changes are made here, right? Here's where the changes occur. No changes occur there. Okay? No changes occur there. This domain controller is going to have the following data on it: user IDs, computer IDs, group policy. All that stuff is going to be stored in that domain controller. What the domain controller is not going to store is passwords. Okay? So if that domain controller does get compromised, I compromise user IDs, computer objects, group objects, user objects, group policy objects, but I don't compromise any of the user passwords. Make sense? So Microsoft created this two groups in Server 2008 called Allow RODC Password Replication and Deny RODC Password Replication. What this allows us to do is, if I put the Rick account in the Allow RODC Password Replication, where Rick authenticates out here, Rick's password will be cached on that domain controller. It'll be cached on that controller. If it's restarted or shut down, the password is lost. Okay? It's cached in memory. And it's there just so that Rick doesn't have to go across the wire to authenticate. Because if the network is down, right, users won't be able to authenticate because I can't get to that nearest upstream site in Phoenix. Question.
That's what we're going to ask.
Right? That's the reason why we cache the passwords. Now, the problem is, there's also a group called Deny RODC Password Replication. All the administrative groups in Active Directory are in that Deny RODC Password Replication. A domain admin's password will be replicated, will never be cached. Enterprise admin, a schema admin, a cert admin, passwords will never ever be cached because they're in that Deny RODC Password Replication. Does that make sense? Now, if we're out here in where the Jonathan site is, right? And out where Jonathan's site is, there's an RODC, right? If Jonathan's in that group that says allow RODC password replication, when Jonathan logs on out of that site, his password will be cached at that site. Not at my site, at that site. Make sense? That's the purpose of RODCs. That's the purpose of RODCs. So we've discussed everything that's on this board. Any questions about anything that's on this board? By the way, for those of you that come back to the 411 class, you're going to see the exact same slide again, but they reverse them. If you come back to the 412 class, you're going to see the exact same slide again, they reverse them again. All right? Everybody good with this? Let me show you real quick. What was that? John, I see a question. You can force replication. And the way you would force replication, if you go in between sites, you're going to set up a thing called a site link. And on the site link, you control how often you replicate between sites. The minimum is 15 minutes, the max is 31 days. Right? But you always can force replication. The easiest way to force replication is if you have the tools. You come into Active Directory Sites and Services, only because I only have one domain controller, I'm not going to be able to do this. Right? But what I would do is I come down to the site, I click on DC1, right? And there'd be another domain controller listed here that I'm replicating one. I could right click on that domain controller and say replicate now. Now, remember, it's a spoiled kid. Am I actually going to replicate just because I said replicate now? No. When's it going to replicate? There's the only time sensitive replications, all right? The only time sensitive replications site is urgent replications. That's the only thing that Microsoft considers time sensitive, is urgent replications. And those are the things that will occur now. If it's not in Microsoft's classification of urgent replication, it has to wait to the whatever the replication cycle is. Now, remember I said that I was not telling you the whole truth? I told you I was going to tell you a fib. Remember I told you that? Here's where the fib is. This is the way Active Directory was in Server 2000, as long as you're in 2000 mode. As soon as I raise my domain functional level to 2003 mode, I get a brand new replication engine. When I get that brand new replication engine, let's say I have 3 replication partners, right? Emory, Matthew, and Devin are my 3 replication partners. As long as it's not urgent replication, 15 seconds after the change is made, I will go to my first replication partner. Emory, I got changes. I will wait 3 seconds. I've got changes. I will wait 3 seconds. Devin, I've got changes. How's that different? In Server 2000, right? Once every 5 minutes I go, hey guys, I got changes. And then the chances are all 3 of you come to me at the same time. This way, I stagger the changes. So to answer the question you had a few seconds ago about time-sensitive information, Jonathan, right? Microsoft realized that waiting to 5 minutes was too long to wait, So when they changed the replication engine in Server 2003, one of the things they changed was you hold the change for 15 seconds and then you notify a replication partner. If you got more than one replication partner, you stagger them on 3-second intervals. Here's what's funny. Microsoft never published that until they published the replication white paper for Server 2008 R2. And when they published the white paper for Server 2008 R2 replication, they said, Oh, by the way, back in 2003, we changed the replication engine to this. Right? I knew they changed it, I just didn't know what they changed the interval to. Because I taught the Active Directory classes, and in 2000, you'd make a change, it would take up to 5 minutes for another machine to get it. And in 2003, all of a sudden, as soon as you raise your phone, it was like, okay, what did they change? Well, we didn't change anything. Well, you changed the replication engine, you already told us that. What did you change? Oh, nothing. Yeah, you did. Oh, no, the only thing we changed was how we replicate, okay? How we replicate. In 2000, we replicate the entire object. I go into a user object, you get all those attributes, I change the phone number, the entire object replicated. In 2003, we only replicate the deltas. So I only replicate the phone number change. That's why I can replicate now on a 15-second interval and not overload the network instead of the 5-minute interval we waited in. But suppose that's all we changed. No, you changed more. No one until the 2008 R2 courseware came. No, any of the courseware now. This is where I'm a geek. Right? I'm a true geek. When I'm prepping for a class, if the courseware references a white paper, or the courseware references a TechNet article or an MSDN article, guess what I go read? I at least scan through it, right? I at least scan through it because I want to know, right, what's in there. I was scanning through a white paper on changes to Active Directory in Server 2008 R2, and I said, oh, by the way, back in 2003, we changed this. It wasn't in the 2003 Active Directory change. It wasn't in the 2008 change document. It's in the 2008 R2 change document. Kind of late behind the power curve. Right? So does that answer your question, Jonathan? Cool. All right. I was going to get there. Trust me. Right? So questions about an RODC. So let me show you in the RODC, right? If I come into Active Directory users and computers, here, see, this is my favorite tool. I come down to, you know what, let me do this. This will make it a little bit easier for people to see. It's going to require me to log off and log back in. Bink, dink, dink, apply, sign out. It's a little bit easier to see. So if I come into the user's OU or container, notice I have a group called deny RODC password replication, allow RODC password replication. There's nobody in this group by default. In the deny, there is a whole bunch of users. So if you're a member of any one of these groups, your password will never be cached on an RODC. Here's what's cool. Now we don't build RODCs in this course, but I'm going to show you something, right? Let's say an RODC was compromised. Right? It was compromised. If I come into this user object, right? Notice, right? There's nothing here that says anything about password replication, nothing here. But if I turn on what's called advanced features, and I come back and look at that user, there's a tab called password replication. This tab will show me every read-only domain controller my password's been cached on. Because this is an Active Directory attribute, I can use PowerShell to retrieve that attribute, right? Go show me any user in Active Directory whose password's been cached on run-svr1 or run-dc2. That domain controller has been compromised. Now I can tell those users, we believe your password's been compromised because this domain controller has been compromised. Make sense? Questions about that?
Maybe that one.
Yes?
Is that only 2012 that you'll see that tab?
No, it's there in 2008 also. You just have to show advanced features.
Okay, because you have to have an RODC in order for that to show up.
No, I don't have an RODC in this environment.
I've never seen that on ours for some reason.
Remember, you have to turn on advanced features to see it.
Oh, I have advanced features on. I
Yep,
was curious.
it's been there ever since,
I'm probably just not noticing
right?
it.
Yeah. If I go to a domain controller, if I go to an actual domain controller itself, right? If I go to properties, right? Notice there's no rule here. If this were an actual domain, an RODC, right? If I come back in, turn on advanced features. If this truly was a read-only domain controller, there'd be a tab that says, right, who do you allow, whose passwords do you allow to be cached on this machine and who's not? Because this isn't a domain, isn't an RODC, I don't have the tab. But on users, the tab's there regardless. Questions about that slide? Right. Okay. According to Microsoft, if you look in the book, there's one sentence about each one of those things. And that was the amount of time I was supposed to spend on this slide. There's Microsoft's slide on domains. Notice the big thing is, right? We use it, it's a replication boundary. There's a slide on OUs. We talked about OUs. We talked about, that's the only slide on Active Directory Forest. They don't have a slide on a tree. That's an Active Directory Forest. There's the schema. Remember I talked about schema has classes and attributes. Right? One thing to be aware of with the schema, you can add to the schema, but you can never delete. You can disable so it's no longer replicated, but you never can delete anything you put in the schema. So what's new in 2012? What's new in 2012? Probably the two biggest done in 2012 are the first two bullets, Prior to Server 2012 and 2012 Hyper-V, it was recommended that you did not virtualize domain controllers. If you did virtualize domain controllers using Microsoft's virtualization, you never ever snapshotted them. Right? We'll see on Friday that a snapshot allows us to roll back in time. If I had a 2000 or 2003 or 2003 R2, a 2008 or 2008 R2 domain controller, and I roll it back in time, it immediately breaks. It no longer will replicate. It breaks it breaks Active Directory. It'll still authenticate users, right? It'll still deploy good policies, but it'll never get any updates. In Server 2012, Microsoft introduced this brand new capability called Generalization Identification, or Generalization ID for short. In Hyper-V Server 2012, with Server 2012 DCs, I now have the ability to virtualize them and, if need be, snapshot them and roll them back in time. Without breaking them. Now, the latest version of VMware also supports that. The other thing that we have, and we do this in the 4.11 class, is I have the ability to clone domain controllers, which is an awesome capability. They got to be virtualized, but I have the ability to clone them. What does that mean? If you've ever rapidly deployed computers before by building a machine and then sysprepping it, right? And then using something like Terrace or Rapid Deploy or Image Blaster or Ghost, rapidly deploying machines, right? You've always been able to do that with anything but a domain controller. In Server 2012, we now have the ability to clone domain controllers, right? We do that in the 4.11 class. In the 4.11 class, you actually get to clone a DC. Now, if you can't wait to the 4.11 class to see how to clone, I have a blog on how to clone. I actually have 2 of them on how to clone. Okay. Unit 2012 R2, right? A couple biggies here, right? The bottom 2 is just, they go on the book, all the different multi-factor authentication that was added. The 2 biggies, though, how many people have heard of Workplace Join? You've probably never heard of it called Workplace Join before. How many have heard of BYOD,
Too often.
right? Bring your own device, right? Bring your own device allows a user, right, to bring a non-domain joined device into the corporate network and gain access to the corporate resources, right? Now, there are things that have to be set up to support that, right? To support that, certificate services have to be configured. You have to have a web application proxy configured so users get their certificates. But once they do that, right, you have the ability to remote wipe the machines in the event that they don't work now. But work join, right? Microsoft originally was only going to support Windows 8.1 and Windows 10 machines. They now have a workplace join client for Windows 7. For Windows 7. They do not plan on supporting Windows 8. 8.1, but not Windows 8. In Windows 10, they now have a brand new acronym, right? CYOD. You have BYOD and CYOD. BYOD is bring your own device, right? You bring your own device in and it allows corporate access. CYOD is choose your own device. Here's what choose your own device is, right? I don't know the specifics of the machine that you really require to do your job, right? So, right? Well, here it's $1,500. Go out and buy whatever the laptop is you need to do your job. Right? He chooses his own device. Now, he goes out and he buys it. He brings it in. It's running Windows 10 or later, right? Which is Windows 10. He brings that in. Windows 10 has a new feature that I can now email him a file that provisions his brand new laptop to be a domain joined device, can actually change the SKU from Windows 10 Home to Windows 10 Pro or Windows 10 Ultimate, right? And can implement security stuff on that machine, send it into this file. That's called a CYOD, choose your own device. Okay? Now, I don't call choose your own device and bring your own device. That's not what I call them, right? You have BYOD and CYOD, right? Sunil's heard this before. Bring your own disaster, choose your own disaster. Right? You heard Matthew. Yeah, I heard this one before. Right? How's it work in the workplace?
Horribly.
Horribly.
Everybody wants a $2,000 laptop to open their email.
Yep. Okay. The other new piece is the web application proxy. In Server 2000, 2003, 2003 R2, 2008, 2008 R2, and 2012, we have this thing called federated services. In federated services, there's a federated server proxy that I can set into my protected DMZ, and that federated server proxy acts as a federated server to authenticate users, and then so that users aren't touching my actual federated server. So I'm not exposing my federated services to the outside world, I'm exposing my proxy. Well, in Server 2012 R2, they decided, well, we're getting rid of the federated server proxy. And we're going to replace it with this thing called a web application proxy. It's no longer installed as part of federated services. It's installed now as a file service. And they refer to it as a reverse proxy. Actually a pretty cool device, right? We build this in the 411 class, or was it 412? One of the classes. But what it allows us to do is, any web-based application we have inside the corporate network, right? We have users gain access to those web-based applications while they're outside or off premises via the web application proxy. All they gotta know is the URL. Okay? When you think about it, that's pretty cool. I don't need VPN, I don't need direct access, right? All they gotta do is know the address of the web application proxy. Questions of what's new? I'm going to knock this out and get us into Lab Hill real quick. So we've already talked about what a domain controller is. All right, choose to authenticate users. Microsoft always recommends that we have a minimum of 2 domain controllers at a site, unless you have RODCs. If you have a read-only domain controller at the site, Microsoft recommends there only be 1. And because someone went, well, why? I want 2. In Server 2008, it wouldn't let you put 2, right? If you went to put a second if you went to put an RODC at a site and there was already a domain controller at the site, it wouldn't let you put one there. Because someone said, well, when I want two there, Microsoft changed it in 2008 R2. I can now have an RODC and a regular domain controller at the same location. You never would, it's ridiculous, but it would let you, right? It would also let you put two RODCs at the same site, right? Again, they're not going to be synchronized with each other. They'll never talk to each other. So a user might get authenticated by this one, but not get authenticated by this one. Okay? You're adding a nightmare to yourself. We talked about the global catalog. Question about the global catalog? The sign-in process. Okay? When a user logs into the domain, the local security authority subsystem connects to the domain controller through the net logon service through a secure channel. Right? It passes the user's credentials to the domain controller. The domain controller then uses its net logon service to query the Active Directory database. If the user's ID and password match, it passes back to that client machine. The user ID and password are a go. Then that local machine goes back to that domain controller and says, right, domain controller, please generate for me what's called a TGT, a ticket granting ticket. In other words, a session ticket that includes the widths of all the groups that the user is a member of. Passes that back to the local machine, and the local machine at that point generates an access token. That access token then includes the user's GUIDs of all the groups that the user is a member of. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is in all previous operating systems, once you got your access token did not dynamically update behind the scenes. You had to log off and log back in for your access token to be updated. Right? You still have to do that for the computer. You have to log off and log back on for the access token to be updated for the computer. But user access tokens now are dynamic. They started that way in Server 2008. And the reason why is this thing called SharePoint. Right? Dynamic, your access tokens are now dynamic. Now, the book still says you got to log off and log back in to get an access token updated. The exam is still, you got to log off and log back in to get an access token updated. Real world, because of SharePoint, right, access tokens can dynamically update behind the scenes. Service records. When I want to locate a resource, support what, Gordon? I'm not sure what you want me to, what the question is, or the statement.
Oh, this is in regards to the bring your own devices.
Oh, yeah. Yep. They want to bring their own device in, then they definitely want you to support it. Most definitely. What was I going to show? Oh, DNS. If I come into my domain controller here, it's also a DNS server. The way I locate resources in Active Directory are through these things called service records. Service records. So if I come into my forward lookup zone, I've got my ADNAM domain, right? I come down to TCP, right? Notice there's a service record for when someone queries looking for a global catalog. Okay? There's a Cerberus, the service record, the Cerberus. There's a service record, right, for the Kerberos server. There's a service record for the Kerberos password server. There's a service record for a domain controller to authenticate a user. Now, what a service record is made up of, see this 3268, 88, 464, 389? That's the port numbers that service specifically runs on. So when a user queries DNS and says, hey, DNS server, I need a global catalog server, it knows how to find that global catalog server. Yep, you do have KMS service records in DNS, right? Jonathan says you also have KMS server. If you're using KMS in your environment, right, which is the key management system for doing installs, it's a different licensing model, right? That's how you would find the KMS server. Is the client machine queries DNS, says, hey, DNS, I need a server that's running port 1688. Right? Make sense? Questions about service records? Right. Operations masters. In order to have a multiple master model, there are certain roles that can only occur on certain machines. There's certain things that can only be on certain machines. There are two of these roles that are forest-wide resources. No matter how large we get, right, there's only one of these each. There are three of these roles that are one. So I have a multiple domain tree. Each domain will have each one of these three, but only one, right? In all previous operating systems, these were known as flexible single masters operation, or FSMOs. Some people call them flexible single operations masters, FSOMs. In Server 2012 and 2012 R2, they're simply known now as operations masters. Every single book, every single tool you use still refers to them as FSOMs. I'm sorry, FSMOs. That's FSMOs. But Server 2012 refers to them strictly as an operations master. The two forest-wide ones. First of all, naming master. The only time the domain naming master has a job is when I add or remove domains in my forest. When I add a domain to the forest, it ensures that that name is unique and is currently not in the meta directory, and then it updates the meta directory with the creation of that domain. When I remove a domain from the forest, it ensures that when I remove the last domain controller, it removes the instance of that domain in the meta directory. That's its sole purpose in life. Then you have a domain controller referred to as the schema master. Now, there is an instructor on staff here that if he hears you say schema master, he comes and slaps you about 10 shoulders, right? The schema master is a domain controller that requires respect, right? If your schema becomes corrupted, you lose your forest, period. So any one of these other roles that you want to protect, this is the one you want to protect the most. As a result of him referring to this as meaning respect, he would never call it the schema master. It was always the schema master. Right? You have to protect the schema master. Right? The schema master is the only domain controller you can make modifications to the schema on. Right? By default, the schema is set to read only. So before you can make a modification to the schema, you have to change the schema to allow edits. You must be a member of a group called schema admins to be able to make modifications to the schema. As I said before, you can make changes to the schema by adding, but you can never delete. So if you create an attribute and then you realize you misspelled the attribute and you already hit the create, it's done. You can't delete it. You can't rename it. What you can do is deactivate it or disable it so it's not replicated to other domain controllers. Okay? One per forest. Usually on the first domain controller you create, that's the one that usually where it stays. Then you have each one of these are going to be located in each domain. The first one is called the RID master. Now, if I am a domain controller and I'm the only domain controller in the environment, if I'm the only domain controller in the environment, I'll give it back, I promise. Right? If I'm the only domain controller in the environment, I have the master pool of RIDs. When a security-based object in Active Directory is created, it takes the SID of the domain and the next RID in the pool, and it creates the SID for that object. Transporter master. As the transporter master, right? How many of you are Trekkie fans? Right? No. Why not? He's lost all confidence of that transporter, right? Question for you. A user's in this domain over here and they're accessing resources. If you're in this industry and you're not a Star Trek fan, get the hell out. No. Right? Which means they got to travel these trust relationships to get there. When I get here, do I want to be exactly the same object I was when I left here? Yeah. Because if while I'm in transit, things get added to my access token or I get removed from my access token, I'm going to lose